I would like to ask the Chairman of the MUA, are there plans to increase the number of charging points across the island in the next 3 years?
On the Chairman of the MUA, Dr Allenson.
Mr President, I would like to thank the Honourable Member for his timely question. Members will recall that in March of this year, Tynwald received and approved a report entitled Home Generation Feed-in Tariffs, Electric Vehicles and Electric Heating for Buildings. This report was prepared by Manx Utilities in response to an amendment to a motion in Tynwald in the October of the previous year. Manx Utilities was asked to provide an update on progress and set out proposals in respect of various matters, including its support for electric vehicles. Several of the actions stated in the report are relevant to this question. The number of public charging points will increase. It is assumed that the number of electric vehicles will increase by around 30% per year. The projections for the next 5 years suggest the number of electric vehicles will increase by 1,800 or 360 vehicles per year, and therefore up to 30 additional charging points will be required annually in order to maintain a 10-to-1 ratio of vehicles to public charging points. Manx Utilities will commit funding to support the installation of additional charging points in order to ensure the ratio of electric vehicles to charging points remains within the European Union targets. Manx Utilities is continuing to work with the Department of Infrastructure to assess the appropriateness of a common public charging infrastructure for the Isle of Man. It is intended that this charging infrastructure will facilitate customer payment for the electricity consumed and provide a contribution to the cost of providing the appropriate charging network. Manx Utilities is working closely with our sponsoring department and local authorities to determine the best sites for the extra charging points and ways of publicising these to residents and visitors. In addition, Manx Utilities is supporting the Department of Infrastructure to ensure provision is made for charging points for government vehicles as more electric vehicles are brought for the government fleet. A procurement process to select a charging point partner will commence shortly, and it is expected new charging point technology, including the ability to collect payment from customers for charging vehicles, will be introduced by the end of the year. Thank you, Mr President.
Supplementary question, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Chairman, for that really detailed and comprehensive answer. How many locations selected for the charging points, and have any private operators shown any interest in working with the MUA in this area?
Minister. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr President. In terms of the selection of the charging points, I think the member makes a very good point there. We need to make sure that they are accessible for the public to try to alleviate any range anxiety that may still exist, but we also need to make sure that they're at high volume areas. So at the moment we have a total of 24 charging stations at 10 locations around the island, and these are at places as diverse as the Bungalow, Ramsey Swimming Pool, Peel, Port St Mary, Port Erin, Douglas, and at our own HQ at Balakotia. In terms of how we go forward, what we are doing is working with the Department of Infrastructure and looking at their parking surveys to ascertain those areas which are used by the public and therefore select those areas which will be of greater use and are worthy of sometimes the significant investment that's necessary to put the chargers in. The question is very much about public charging points, but I think the member makes a very good point about private charging points. And I know of several hotels and visitor attractions that have put in their own charging points. I'd also like to thank the Chair of the Post Office for the work that she's done in terms of their electric fleet. And I know of several large employers who've also put... Thank you, Mr Speaker. Also put charging points in their premises to actually help out with their employees.
Supplementary message.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm sure it's difficult to hear the Chairman sometimes on the back here, but I'm sure he said that they will commit funds. Is the Chairman aware that funds were committed to this activity during the last administration? Was that fund ring-fenced, and can he provide a breakdown of spend from that fund to date?
Chairman to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. In terms of the last administration, I think the member is referring to a fund from the Department of Infrastructure rather than Manx Utilities, and I'm not aware of what happened to that fund or how it was used appropriately. Manx Utilities are looking forward to providing, within the next 12 months, 30 extra public vehicle charging points, but also within that period we will be looking to help private enterprise and also government departments extend the number of charging points that are available throughout the country. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I'm sure in the middle of that very long and detailed answer, the Chairman mentioned that these new charging points will have the ability to have payment meters built into them. So at the moment, of course, the MUA's policy is to provide for free use of these charging points. So can the Chairman give us some indication as to when he'll be coming forward with a change in this policy to give people a bit of an indication as to roughly when they might be expected to start having to pay for use of public charging?
Dr Allenson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. What the policy has been up until now is to try to incentivise people to move to electric vehicles. Manx Utilities, and I'm sure the rest of the government, are aware that these up until now have been more expensive than diesel or petrol vehicles, and so trying to get people to take up new technology has been very useful. However, the Honourable Member from Ramsey is quite right that we are now at the end of this period of first adopters, and as I said in the answer to the question from the Honourable Member from Mr Moorhouse, by the end of the year we will have the ability to charge, and we will be charging for the electricity used.
Ms Sage, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. The Chairman actually said that he's moving forward. He really, I felt, dismissed the fact that there was a fund available. I think it was up to £50,000. I'd like to know where this money has been spent.
Dr Allenson.
Thank you, Mr President. I apologise to the Honourable Member. As I've already said, I'm not aware of a fund for Manx Utilities for up to £50,000, but if you'd like to give me the details of that, I shall be more than happy to look into it from a Manx Utilities perspective. But obviously what we're doing is working very closely with other departments, and so the fund that she's talking about may actually be based in another department.
Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. The outcome of the 2035 or 2050 vote later today could heavily impact on the number of charging points required over the next 3 years. Is the MUA in a position to actually meet that increased expectation?
Have a surge.
Allenson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. As I've said, what we're trying to do with Manx Utilities and our work with the Department of Infrastructure is to balance the number of charging points that will be needed, very much based on the number of electric vehicles which are out there, and do this in actually transition. So what we're looking for eventually will be several thousand charging points around the area to meet that demand. If with the DEFA forecast that we'll need about 10,000 electric vehicles by 2030, we may need over 6,000 charging points publicly available to meet the needs of those people who are occupants of flats or terraced houses, who perhaps don't have off-street parking, and so need for that. But I can reassure the member that in our paper in March, we actually looked at the increase in peak load that may be caused by this number of electric vehicles, and there's a page in the paper which looks at that, and certainly our generation capacity can meet that. However, he does make a very good point that as we move towards electric vehicles, we will, and their increased use, we will also need to transition in terms of the way we generate that electricity so that it is genuinely green. Thank you, Mr President.